Pulse wasn't just a nightclub. It was a place where people could come to feel welcome. It didn't matter who you were, who you wanted to be. You felt loved. This is what Pulse is now.
It was really important to me that people learned not only the story of what happened at Pulse that night, but also what you can do differently in your life to change the future, how we can become a better society, a better human race. That's why I began the foundation.
I hope that the memorial will bring people together from all walks of life, but I also hope that it can be a place of love.
As a family member, I said, I hope they turn this place into a museum. I want people to come visit so they can take what happened here and pass it on.
I'm really excited about the educational opportunity of the museum and the wonderful things that the onePULSE Foundation is working on to build a stronger global community.
And my hope is that when they walk out, they've learned not only what happened on June 12th, but how to be a better human, that they will be able to spread the message that we will not let hate win. They will leave equipped how to do that.
The interim memorial now is built and it's amazing.
The pictures that are on the barrier wall are of love and support and unity, but mostly you will see a community, a global community.
This is a magical place. It's always a rainbow. You'll see a cloud look like an angel. It's peaceful.
People ask if they should come to the memorial. I always recommend it.
It is so welcoming.
There are so many stories.
You can't help but feel the impact.
I think everyone should see this.
You'll be so happy that you did.
It gives you a lot of energy of how to go forward.
And it's a really beautiful cathartic experience.
And they're teaching kids that there's no difference between one another person. You always should love.
We found it really important that our angels were not just a name on a wall. And that's why we developed our scholarship program. We had 49 individual scholarships, each in the name of one of our angels, designated by their family members as a way to make sure that their stories lived on forever.
After visiting the memorial, we want people to feel like they're changed for the better, that they want to get involved because the goal is really to stop hate.
There are just so many ways that people can engage with the foundation. Volunteering at our offices, helping us with our events, even just being a guide on site. It's an easy, simple way to be part of the solution.
Being a volunteer for the onePULSE Foundation, it's a life-changing experience.
Come out, check it out, and get involved. Go to the onePULSE Foundation website.
Donate to the onePULSE Foundation to help us build the memorial site to honor all of them, to keep the memories going forever.
Everybody's human. Treat everybody equally.
Love still wins, and the message is still alive and well.
It's going to change your life.
We will not let hate win.
We will not let hate win.
We will not let hate win.
Nosotros no dejaremos que el odio gane.
We will not let hate win.
We will not let hate win.
We will not let hate win.
Love is love, and we will not let hate win.
Pulse nightclub in Orlando was not just a place where people could be free to be themselves, but a place to find community and safety. To know that the essence of Pulse was shattered by a mass shooting and terrorist attack in our country remains just as unimaginable today as it was that night, June 12, 2016. The National Pulse Memorial and Museum is intended to preserve the heart of Pulse, a place where everyone was welcomed and loved. The memorial would be designed as a place to grieve, to honor lives taken and saved, as well as serve as a place to heal and learn. The museum will serve as a community space to tell the history of safe spaces, the tragedy of June 12, 2016, and the response and support of the world. I hope you'll join me in supporting the onePULSE Foundation and help build the National Pulse Memorial and Museum so that we never forget what happened to those precious lives that were taken. We won't let hate win.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Earl Mawat, Vice President of Education for onePULSE Foundation. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for another virtual film screening and panel discussion. These conversation starters are made possible through the generous contributions of our sponsors. So we want to thank JPMorgan Chase, City Furniture, and Orlando Utilities Commission for making these presentations possible and continue to impact change. Our mission at onePULSE Foundation is to create and support a memorial that opens hearts, a museum that opens minds, educational programs that open eyes, and legacy scholarships that open doors. To date, we have awarded more than 900,000 scholarships to undergraduate and graduate students. They are carrying on the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of our 49 angels. Our educational programming under onePULSE Academy officially launched last year with our Conversation Starter. It was a film screening of 90 days, which explored HIV within the Black community. And it was told from a straight perspective, where the woman in the story was HIV positive and her fiance did not know. What we learned from that was that HIV affects the African American community differently than it does the populations at large. And that's what these conversation starters are intended to do, to open our eyes to new perspectives in understanding our social world. We followed 90 Days with numerous other screenings, with topics ranging from transgender lives to the March for Civil Rights. We are thrilled to partner nationally with amazing writers, directors, and producers to not only showcase their important work, but to have a discussion afterwards. You'll be introduced later to our incredible panelists who will be leading tonight's discussion. We're about to get things started, but before we do, please note that the parental discretion is strongly advised for some adult themes and brief nudity. And now, we are so excited to present to you tonight's short film Ghost by filmmaker M.H. Murray. Ghost explores someone's solitary experience with being ghosted. It's touching, it's poignant, it's beautifully acted, and M.H. captures it in the most artistic and creative way. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you all to Ghost filmmaker M.H. Murray to offer his welcome and opening comments. But before I go, be sure to stay connected after the film for the panel discussion with M.H., Ghost lead actor Mark Clinton, and our expert panel. Okay, I'll see you in a few. M.H., it's on you, my friend.
Hi, everyone. My name's M.H. Murray. I'm the writer, director, editor of the short film Ghost that we're about to watch. This is a little short film that we made a couple years ago that we toured some festivals with. And I'm really excited to talk about it after, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message.
Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to bring in Mark, the star of the film, to chat a bit about, the process and what we went through making this. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Matt.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So what's like one funny or one interesting thing, like, tidbit that you can think of from shooting this movie?
I kept on thinking the whole time we were shooting how realistic this is, like how I've been in this position before, and
Yeah.
how I felt like a lot of people would relate to it because it's such a common part of dating in 2022 or whatever year, we're in. And yeah, I don't know. I just had this really keen sense that this was like very close to home, not just for me, but for a lot of people. In terms of anything fun that happened on set or like anything crazy, we had a pretty smooth filming experience. Nothing really crazy happened. I wish I had a better story to tell of like something funny, but we're all professionals.
It was
We all
very
showed up.
serious. It was a very serious shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was serious and luckily very smooth. Like nothing to my knowledge went off. I mean, I've been on sets where everything goes wrong and you're just like struggling for air. This one just kind of felt really smooth and everyone was there. Everyone believed in the project. Everyone believed in the script, and we're all professionals. And I guess one thing that is like a fun like tidbit from the day was that I don't know if you remember, but there was a scene where my character is like walking and crying, and we shot it. So we shot it near where I live, and I remember us walking by a restaurant and me crying and looking into the restaurant, and someone's like, "Is he okay?"
Yeah, we did a lot of like guerrilla shooting, I guess, for this, just walking around and forcing Mark to be very emotional in public. So thank you for doing that.
So like, should we send help or is he?
Yeah. And another interesting thing about it, I guess, is like we did, like you said, we shot in your space and we shot around your house. So I think maybe that lends like a sense of like naturalism or realism to it. And was it like difficult, like easier for you think, to get into the character because we were, there was a lot of those elements involved, or?
I think it was harder actually because I feel like when you're in your space, you're very conscious of certain things. So like you're more sensitive to like, what is he doing? Don't touch that, or like, why is this person there? And so stuff like that I think made it a little bit harder. But also, especially shooting things outside, I've lived in my neighborhood for a long time and I know everyone and everyone knows me. And it was a little bit awkward to be able to get into character sometimes because you're seeing your neighbors and they're like, what's happening? Whereas I've been in other stuff where you are just so far from your own life that you can kind of create something crazy. Like I could act crazy on the street and no one knows me or cares, and there's no conversation for later. But at the same time, I think in some ways it was harder, but in some ways it was easier to be in a space that I live in and that I'm familiar with and that I know where things are and how to move through that space. So I think it had its pros and cons.
So thank you, MH and Mark, for sharing. And good evening, audience. I hope you enjoyed the presentation of Ghost. And now it's time for the panel discussion where we explore ghosting culture. Joining us this evening are ghost filmmaker MH Murray. MH.
Hi, Earl.
How you doing? Someone you might be familiar with, actor and singer Mark Clennon.
Hi, Earl.
Hey, Mark. My favorite influencer and Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity brother, Nigel Ashford, who is the founder of Outspoken Media.
Hey, Earl.
Nigel, good to see you on deck. And last but certainly not least, we have mental health therapist and from Under the Rug, Brandon Kennedy.
Hey, Earl. Good evening, everybody.
Great. It's great to have everyone on deck. So ghosting culture, right? That's something that's emerging with all this new technology, right? So one thing I'd like to start this off, MH, MH, what inspired you to make this short film?
Oh God, probably just a collection of different experiences. I had just had like my first real, I guess, like relationship right before I made this movie. And I wasn't ghosted in the relationship, but I think it just brought out a lot of those emotions. And getting back into the dating scene, it can be, it can be a lot. But I think it was just a way for me to like explore those feelings of anxiety and frustration that come when you're looking for something from another person and they aren't giving it to you, either by choice or for other reasons. And I wanted to explore it through, I guess it's not a specific. It's ghosting is something that can happen to anyone, but it was important to me that it was like through a queer narrative because I think, my theory is that as queer people, like sometimes the stakes can feel a little bit higher or something when you're dating because there's less of us. So when you find someone that you really like, sometimes you can there's that sort of anxiety that creeps in where you're like, ugh, where am I gonna find, gonna have to start all over again. But yeah, and then I knew Mark, and it seemed like the perfect project for us to collaborate on and to utilize, some of his musical talents as well as his performance talents.
Yeah, well, we'll get into Mark's performance because he was astronomical at this, right? But for the audience, MH, right? Some folks might not know what ghosting is. Do you want to briefly tell them what it is or explain what it is?
Ghosting to me, like, I think ghosting has probably been happening, forever. But in the modern sense, ghosting is like when you have some sort of conversation or a relationship or some sort of social interaction that's ongoing with someone, and then it's just suddenly sort of cut off, or that person just disappears or vanishes like a ghost. And yeah, it can bring out so many different feelings. And, that's sort of what we explored in the film, and I guess what we'll be discussing here today. But essentially, it's just the act of disappearing without explanation, sort of like an Irish goodbye.
Is that what it is? Well, Nigel, I see you are nodding, right? Yeah. So let me ask you, is ghosting ever appropriate?
If you feel like your life is in danger, or you feel like the guy is a creeper, I would say yes. Such as if they are, let's say, hey, I found a picture of your mom and I found a picture of you back, like, whoa, okay, we're taking this slow time by time, like let's take a pause. But I feel that ghosting is very cowardless. If I must say, I feel you're unable to face the problem. You're able to communicate or converse with a person, letting them know, hey, this is not working out. Because just letting someone know can give someone a peace of mind. Being ghosted, I think it leaves your mind to wonder, what did I do wrong? Was it me? Was it my personality? Was it my body? Did they not have a good time? And I'd rather know a specific reason than to be left with all these different thoughts. Also, people don't know the psychological trauma that ghosting can have on you. When I was watching your movie, I thought of the person. I saw myself cooking dinner. I saw myself having that experience. I saw myself feeling, I can't wait. Me and this person, we had a good night last night. We're going to have a good night tonight. And then they don't show up. But when people ghost, I feel that they think, okay, I'm the only person doing this to this one person, but they will be okay. Not thinking that this person was probably ghosted 5, 6, 7 times before, not only by another male individual that they might be interested in, but probably by friends, or probably by their parent, or probably by something that could cause type of triggers that can say, well, who wants me? Who wants to be around me? Who wants to be in my circle? Who's going to love me? And all those things will start to circle around. So do I ever think ghosting is appropriate? Yes, like I said, if you feel that the person might cause any type of harm, then, disappear, block them. But I feel that as human beings, everyone is owed the respect to communicate if you dislike them or you feel like that it's not working or going anywhere.
Thank you for that, Nigel. And you said something to me that I thought was really interesting. Psychological harm. Psychological harm. Now, Brandon, right? You're a resident mental health therapist. What are some of the psychological harms associated with ghosting?
I think when we're looking at psychological harms, a lot of people might be sticking a dagger towards me for saying it, but I think that a lot of what we perceive as psychological harm is actually the self-inflicted aspects of ghosting. I don't think that the actual act itself is what's inflicting the most harm. I think our expectations that, like Nigel had mentioned a second ago, is as if like I am owed this particular thing. In all actuality, nobody really owes anything, but I think it goes back to that self-reflection and introspection about the foundation that I'm choosing to operate my life from and based off of. It's like, all right, if I didn't necessarily get this, am I still okay? And if we don't do that due diligence to make sure that we're still okay by operating from that healthy foundation with choosing to engage in different types of behaviors, I think we kind of set ourselves up for what I would call the okie doke, if you will. I think that a lot of that psychological harm of invalidation or not feeling as if you might be good enough or looking at things about your body, with a lot of people that I've talked to surrounding ghosting and things like that, when we get into the meat and potatoes of what's really going on, they were dissatisfied with what their body looked like much more further beyond before the ghosting aspect came into play, or they were already made aware that they might have taken too much of the spotlight during a dating process, if you will, and they continued that behavior. And it's like, well, if you chose to still continue to do something that you knew might have potentially been problematic, the lack of self-reflection or lack of self-assessment is really the due diligence of the person, but not necessarily the other party that's being engaged.
Thank you for sharing, Brandon. Mark, you handle that performance with such nuance, right? I mean, you just brought everybody into that ghosting situation. How do you handle being ghosted? Was that a real life articulation of how you would handle it? How would you handle? How do you handle being ghosted for real? For real?
I think there's varying levels of ghosting. I think there's ghosting like someone not texting me back, or someone not responding to a message or something like that. And then there's ghosting in the case in the film where there was an event planned, like we had like a date, we had like something set up. I think it's kind of unfortunate, but I think at this stage in my life, I've experienced a fair bit of both. That I'm not really. It doesn't affect me as much as maybe it would have when I was, in my younger days. So I feel like I'm not bragging because it's probably not a good thing. It means that I'm kind of getting like callous. But I feel like at this point, with the exception of those extreme scenarios where like you have like a date planned or maybe going on a trip or something like that, it doesn't bother me as much, unfortunately or fortunately, because I feel like, going back to what Brandon was saying, I feel like you have to have. I feel like ghosting is sort of like ghosting is not appropriate and it hurts and it feels bad. But I feel like if you're someone who's confident and believes in yourself and knows what you have to offer, I feel like it hurts a little bit less. And I feel like having been through, the experience before, I've come to the point now where I'm like, if I'm being ghosted, it's probably not because I'm a horrible person or because I'm ugly or because I'm incompetent. It's probably their own issues. Maybe they have insecurities. Maybe they're afraid of something. And so I try not to, and I'm human and it doesn't always happen, but I try not to make it about me. And I just think, okay, well, maybe they're too busy. Maybe they have their own issues. And I also think sometimes that when I'm ghosted, it's kind of like, thank you for showing me what, like, first allowing me to evade that kind of behavior. Sorry, my cat is interrupting. So it kind of, sometimes I feel really good about it because I'm like, you know what, if you are able to behave like this in the infancy of a relationship, you'll likely have this type of behavior later on. So it kind of is like a blessing to see it sometimes. Yeah. I
have a question for you, Mark, and probably anybody else on my jump. When when you get to that place, do you think that you accept the fact that ghosting is a possibility that may happen from the very beginning of interaction? Or do you only get to that place after it looks like things are starting to become a little shady, and then you start processing those thoughts that you just said?
I think, unfortunately, because I've been an adult for a long time and have had these experiences, I feel like nothing is off the table, unfortunately. And even though I'm an optimistic person and everyone that I meet, I'm like, oh, this is, I'm not a pessimist that thinks everything is doomed from the start. I'm definitely someone who has an open mind and is positive and expecting the best. But I also think that, there's a realistic side to me where I'm like, this is a possibility, which is the unfortunate part of ghosting, is that not like, just like Nigel was saying, if being ghosted once, twice was one thing, but when you have a lifetime of ghosting, it sort of morphs how you behave. So maybe when I was younger, I would have met someone and been like, oh, he's the love of my life, I'm going to marry him, he's amazing. Whereas now at my age, having experienced these disappointments so much, I could meet someone who is potentially this great person, but because of those experiences, I'm like, oh, all right, here we go. Let's try this again. And it kind of it lowers the expectation a little bit, which is great in evading pain, but it's also not great in terms of allowing yourself to experience these relationships.
Okay.
So I have a question that I'll toss out to everyone on deck, right? What do you do if you run into someone that has ghosted you at some kind of social event? Awkward, right? How do you process that? What do you do? Anybody?
I ignore. If they come up to me, I think I will have a formal conversation like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" But other than that, I don't think I would speak. I don't think they're owed that. But if they do come up to me and want to start a conversation, I think we would be mature and adult about it. And I wouldn't even bring it up. I was like, oh, how are you doing? Oh, cool. How's everything going? That's great. My friends over there, it was good speaking to you. See you later. And then you move on and you just learn.
MH, you had a
Go ahead.
Oh, again. MH, you had this look on your face when I mentioned looking at Brandon, but explain that.
No, I didn't. Oh God.
Yeah.
Like, you're asking me what I think of that, or what I think of?
Yeah, if you ran into someone that ghosted you at some kind of social event.
I think what Nigel is saying is like the most mature and best thing to do. But there's definitely a small part of me that would want to be a little bit shady, or just like a little bit like, oh, nice seeing you here or something. But I don't think you ever want to like dig too deep into the weeds or anything. Like, you don't need to be like, oh, so why did you ghost me? Because kind of like Mark was saying, like, oftentimes I don't think there is a reason, like there's no reason that you'll hear that will like give you, even if they're like, oh, I ghosted you because, just don't really like you or something, then you just feel like shit. So there's no answer that you'll get that will really make you feel better. But I think if you are in a social setting and you do see someone that, kind of disappeared, it would bring up a lot of different emotions, and I would definitely be tempted to like say something to them, not necessarily in something like super confrontational, but just sort of to just to sort of see where they're at or something.
Would it be shady in your approach?
It would be a little bit shady for sure, but it depends on the situation. If it's someone that you didn't know that well and they just kind of disappeared, then it's one thing. And also, like, I believe Mark or someone said, like, there are different levels of ghosting. If in the film Ghost, like, the reason why I chose to make it like the night after, like sort of post-coital, was because I feel like that's like a more intense, like there's more intense emotions there, and like that's almost more like it's more outrageous to just like disappear like the night after. Whereas if it was like, if you hadn't seen them for a couple of weeks and then they disappear, the feelings would be a bit more like numb or something. So yeah, there's different situations, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to Brandon. My apologies. Go ahead. You had a question that you wanted to ask Nigel.
Yeah, I did, and actually, I guess open to the panel. And also, I like the way that you curated the story, MH, because the way you curated the story is oftentimes what you see today. It's like, all right, you ghosted me. However, we've already started. I mean, and how many apps, whether it's Grindr, Jack, Scruff, any of the other apps, how many of them, including like, what's the other one that I'm complete? Tinder and Hinge, like a lot of them offer followings through social media, right? And how often do people follow each other on social media before they even meet each other? So then it's like, all right, you ghosted me, but now I'm looking at your lives and I'm seeing that you're out and about and having a really
exactly
good time,
right.
It's a great sense of
more, yeah.
But the thing I was Nigel brought up a really good point. And a lot of my patients will tell you that I never encourage passive aggressive behavior unless passive aggressive behavior can be utilized more than likely in a very jokingly kind of way to get somewhere. Like, for example, if you walked into someone's house that you were interested in and their house was probably not the cleanliest and you were a really cleanly person, it's like, oh, wait, I was going to have a conversation with you. Does this look okay to you? I think there's sometimes a way to bring up passive aggressive behavior and not have it come across as just like blatantly defensive, right? Or offensive. But with what Nigel brought up, I think sometimes we have some unnecessary conversations with people. Like if I had this interaction with you and that interaction did not necessarily go in a way that I deemed to have been like, a mature fashion, etc., I can acknowledge you visually. I can acknowledge you and still kind of go on about my day without feeling this extra added pressure to feel as if I have to respond to you. I have to engage with you. You don't owe that person anything, just like felt like they didn't owe you anything when they decided to ghost you. And I think sometimes we don't think about that as we are navigating some of those awkward moments that Dr. Earl was talking about. It's like, why do I feel this need to engage with this person? And I think, again, going back to self-assessment and self-evaluation, what is it about this situation or our dynamic that makes me feel as if I need to engage with this individual? Mm-hmm. Like, do I really care about how your day was? No, I really don't. I just, hey,
that light banter.
Maybe not even this. It's like sometimes just, and it says a lot. Like you can tell a lot with a person through eye language.
Hey, Brandon, I got a question for you. Going back a little bit, right? You mentioned apps. Does technology, these apps, do they encourage ghosting? Encourage?
No, I won't say that they encourage ghosting. However, I will say that they offer a foundation that's conducive to make it a little bit more effective. It's so easy to go in and click a block button, if you will, or to just simply continue to swipe left and not even engage or read. But I would assume most people would probably do the blocking thing unless they're attention seeking. Then they would probably not block the person and just continue to look at all the interactions that are happening, knowing that they're ignoring the person on purpose. It's still doing something for the person. Otherwise, why do you want to subject yourself to that type of visual behavior, if you will? So no, I won't go so far as saying that I feel that they encourage ghosting, but I just think it's a perfect platform to do it through.
All right, thank you. I'm going to ask a question to the panel, and this is something that everybody probably wants to know, right? So why is it, panelists, expert panelists, why is it so hard to text back and give someone closure? Make them reduce some of that psychological harm. Why is it so hard? Anybody?
I don't know.
Sounds like MH may want to go.
I do think on some level, sort of to counter a little bit what Brandon was saying, like I do think on some level we do owe each other, like grace and decency. Like someone has to be pretty shitty to you for you to feel like you don't owe them any kind of explanation. But also, I think it is okay to take your time, and if you maybe don't want to, if you can't answer the same day, or if you need even days or weeks to yourself, I think as long as you eventually explain yourself or try to level with the person, I think that's important. But I also think maybe because I don't know if it's different now, with all this technology we have around us or so many distractions, but I do think it is easy to get swept up and to forget to get back to someone or
MH, do you ever feel guilty about ghosting someone?
Sure, yeah. If I don't think I've ever ghosted someone to the degree where I just completely disappear and never come back, but definitely sometimes I might take a bit longer to get back to a certain person or or something like that. So yeah, like.
All right, good. So anybody else want to chime in about why is it so hard to give someone closure, text them back, give them closure?
I think it's just going back to what I said earlier. I think some people are I feel like some people are afraid to hurt someone's feelings if they verbalize, hey, I don't like you in that way, and they don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. B, I think sometimes people are cowardly. They rather say nothing and leave than to have the courage to express how they feel. And C, I feel like some people just don't even give a crap about your feelings. And they're like, oh, that didn't work. And then they just move on and go on about their day. But I've been on both sides. I think when I was younger, I would ghost. But as I've gotten older and seeing how it affected me emotionally or psychologically, like I say, okay, then the other person is feeling that too. But I think that came with maturity, and I think that came with experience. But yeah, and I think also in before, especially when I was super plus size, when I was 250 and was getting ghosts compared to when I lost the weight, and people were now paying me attention and understanding like, oh wow, it's crazy how things have changed, and it gave me like a different perspective. So I think it also is a mature thing, a thing of maturity as you get older, or not even as you get older, as you get wiser, and just giving somebody that respect and that due of communicating that I'm not interested in you.
Doctor, I think that one of the things too to take into consideration is we talk about the word privilege a lot nowadays. Like we utilize it, but we mostly utilize it in terms of racial disparities and differences. But I think privilege is a word that can kind of accurately describe why it is that we feel that a person should give a person that sense of closure. I think we have the privilege of knowing what it's like to feel that certain type of way. What if the person on the other end of the spectrum doesn't know what it feels like to not have that sense of closure? What if they've only gotten the other side of it? And I think sometimes it's a privilege to know what you know, or to feel what you feel, or to have garnered the sense of maturity that you've already garnered. But I think that a lot of people arrive to it when they arrive to it, and some people never arrive to it. But I think we have to take all of those different things into perspective as well too. For example, like if I see a person on the street and I'm calling the person on the street crazy, is that person really crazy, or does crazy also have a story, right? But if I don't have the privilege of knowing just how much different things can impact a person's life in terms of their mental health and how they might have gotten there, I might just look at crazy on the street as crazy on the street. But there's something that's deeper to it. But just to have that thought process is also a privilege. It's a privilege for us to just kind of operate in what we feel is our right frame of mind on a regular day basis. But we take a lot of things for granted.
Good point, Brandon. Thank you for sharing that out. I had a question for the ghosters on deck, right? Do you ever? I don't mean that in a negative way.
Raise your hands.
Right? Raise your hands.
Well, show yourselves.
It is no. You know what? Look, this is just where we are in society. There's no disparaging comments or anything like that, right? This is where we are, and we'll talk about that. This is just where relationships are moving forward with, to an extent, technology and just how we operate, right? I do want to ask though, do you ever still think about the person after ghosting them? And even if you think about them, what prevents you from contacting them? I'll throw that out to anyone. Mark, you look like you're deep in thought. I always pick up on expressions. Right? So, if you give me that poker face, I'll never call. Right? You ever think about them?
I'm not going to say I've never ghosted anyone before, but I try not to. And I think in the instances where I have ghosted people, there's usually a pretty strong reason why. And so I generally don't think of them after. But I think it's really complicated because I feel like technology has created such a space and a platform for ghosting. Because if you think about it, like if I met someone in real life and we hit it off and we had a great time and either we work together, we have same circle of friends, it's in my best interest, regardless of how I feel, to move forward diplomatically. Like say things don't work out, I'm like, I have to speak I have to deal with this delicately because, you know, Brandon or Nigel or whoever I'm chatting with is my friend in a friend circle, and that's important for me. Whereas I feel like online, these are absolutely complete strangers that, you know, you don't feel an obligation to. You feel like they're just, you know, especially when you look at how so many of these social media platforms and dating apps commoditize men. It's like we're not really like if I'm on a dating app and someone sees me, they're not seeing intelligent, smart, brilliant, artistic, creative Mark. They're just seeing no, they're just seeing a face and a thing that can help them with whatever, you know what I mean, like for attention or for whatever. So I feel like, you know, it creates a space where we ghost more than we normally would.
So, Mark, I want to tag on that a little bit because you just mentioned something that just came to mind. So the thing with social media is, right, if you don't know people, they're in your weak links, right? And so you can be whoever you want to be on social media, right? You can create a veritable avatar of yourself. And like you can be someone, they won't know you're a dancer. They can think that you're something else, right? Or an actor, entertainer. So you create that. So when you exchange communication and that lie breaks down a little bit, right? Or if you meet somebody and that falsehood disintegrates, is it then, does that person deserve to be ghosted? Asking. Or do you get to know the person? Anybody
I think
on that.
You're saying like if someone is presenting a false sense of themselves
Facade.
online and you meet them
a facade.
and realize it. Okay, I get it. I mean, I think it's really complicated, man, because I feel like with technology, it that's what we all do. Like we all put up our best selves. Like if someone goes to my Instagram, they're like, "Oh, this guy does this, he does that," but then you see me in real life, and I'm a complicated person with like, you know, I'm not always this like, you know, well lit image that you see on social media. So I think that's just the reality for dating, and I think this is the difference between dating through technology and dating in real life. If I see you in real life, I'm seeing you as you are. I'm not seeing, there's no filter, the lighting is not that great. It's just what you are. So I feel like I'm able to make an assessment on whether I'm attracted to you based on those tangible things. Whereas online, you know, like who knows how many adjustments you've made to that image. Also, you're selective in what you're posting. So you're probably only posting the shots of you when you're at your best and you're doing these cool things, whereas you're not posting the other stuff. So I think that's just the byproduct of social media and technology, which I think technology and social media are great things, but I think that along with that comes these negative things. But sadly, that's just the reality of dating in the internet age.
But you know, it just seems like it's like 6 1 half dozen the other, because really you talk about the tangible, you talk about the physical, right? Of how a person looks, you know, how they talk and things like that. But then people put on facades in that situation, that circumstance. So, you know, it's the same thing. If you can do it in real life, not be really authentic and be who you want that person, who you think the person wants you to be. But don't we do that online as well? Right? Being who you want the person to think you are. So it's a really weird kind of situation.
Or what you think society at large feels that you should be. Because I mean, I would find it odd if a person might create one profile online that's specific for one person, right? As opposed to, I think that society and the type of people that I'm drawn to would want me to look like this. So now that profile is created for the masses, if you will, when inside of what it is that you want to attract. If I am really into muscle guys, maybe I might put some things in my profile that are very muscle bound. Maybe I put the arm emoji and all these other different types of things so that it will entail that maybe this is what it is that I'm looking for, and you might be that type of person.
Good point. I have another question that I'm going to throw out to the panel, right? So we all know how this works, right? It's something, if you want something, right, and it's hard to attain, it makes you even want it more, right? So that's kind of like the psychology of ghosting, right? You can't get it, so it makes you even want it even more, that individual even more, right? So you go with this fervor of, oh, why is this person not contacting me? It's me, right? So let me ask the question. If that person that ghoster reappears, if that person reappears, what do? Do you go forward with that? Hey, I've been missing you, right? Or do you is that a red flag? Be real, because our emotions eclipse logic, right? So let's go.
I think it's a red flag. One of my friends, he was calling me, I think, a serial, what do you
Serial
call it?
dater?
Not a serial dater. He was like, God, you be shooting them down. And it's because now I kind of notice red flags, such as, okay, inconsistencies, okay, negative thinkings, negative mindset. Okay, like I just notice stuff, and I always say in my mind, can I handle that for like 30 to 40 or 50 years in my life, especially when you're looking for a partner and you want to know that, hey, I want to get married one day. Can I handle that for the rest of my life? And when I say in my side, no, like I say, okay, red flag, nope, move on. Like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna continue something that I know that's not gonna work. And usually I dislike when people say, hey, if you're on Messenger or you're on Instagram message and you have a good, conversation going, and then all of a sudden they go cold for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they hit you back, what's up, stranger? And it's like, wait a minute, you're the one who stopped talking to me. And that just shows a thing of inconsistency. I feel that if someone's really interested in you, if someone really wants to talk to you, they will talk to you. They will try to open up those means of communication and try to get in touch with you at least once or twice before they give up if they're truly interested in you. But if they're not.
Here's the point, though, Nigel. So, there's that term now, because I was doing my homework on all this stuff, right? Breadcrumbing, right? So how do you know when you're being breadcrumb? I guess that's when people, they kind of ghost you, but semi-ghost you, right?
Earl, so you know more than me. I need you.
I'm about to say,
I need you to give me a
and listen, before I even put my foot in my mouth, right? I'm assuming this is just from memory now, because you got to do your homework and all this stuff, right? I think that the term is breadcrumbing, right? So that's, and audience, please correct me if I'm wrong, right? It's where they kind of lead you on, but never, become that person you want them to be, and move forward. So they reach out to you, then they ghost you, then they reach out to you, then they ghost you, then they reach out to you. How do you know when to just stop? Go ahead, Brandon.
That I think a lot of this boils back down to the worth of self-work. When you know what it is that you value, when you know what it is that you're looking for, it helps you to that much more easily isolate out the things that you're not looking for, and more so, it'll stick out almost like a sore thumb, if you will. It's like there's a bunch of purple flowers and there's one red one. You know what I mean? I think that a lot of times, if the breadcrumbing is continuing to happen, I don't want to take away from the self-accountability aspects of it. We also are usually a part of whatever it is that we're choosing to engage in. Sure, this person is dropping breadcrumbs, but we only really know it if we still continue to choose to engage in it. But then it goes back to, actually, am I worth doing breadcrumbs, or am I worth somebody just, offering the whole loaf, or at least let me know what ingredients is inside the dough before we put it in the oven?
Yeah, but that takes a certain amount of fortitude, right? Therapy, if you will, to really get to that point where you can, notice those signs and say, okay, I've got this. I'm not going to be, fall victim to this. But I think that most people, the heart, that whole saying, the heart wants what the heart wants, just occur. Conjure up. That is something real. A lot of times our emotions drive us and our passions drive us more than our ability to reason, especially trying to understand ourselves. It's not that easy. We're complex. That's why we have therapists, right? So how does the average person?
But you brought up a great point. I think that with what you just said, a lot of it is about asking ourselves why it is that we want what we want in the first place. Like, why do I choose interracial dating? Why do I want someone who might be a little bit on the heavier side in terms of their weight? Why do I want someone who is more muscly? Why do I want someone who's a family person? A lot of these different things come along with various reasons that I oftentimes encourage a lot of my clients to really look into and to not discredit. Like, for example, I have a client that was seeing a heterosexual client, but he was seeing a young lady. They had two completely different things in terms of what they like to do with dieting and fitness and stuff like that. And it's like, a lot of times those can be really big red flags. how it is that I choose to live life and how it is you choose to live life and how we cohabitate, that sometimes you can run into really big flags that shouldn't be ignored in terms of compatibility.
And going off of what Brandon just said, I think a lot of us don't have those type of conversations. I think going in, especially when dating, I always ask, what are you looking for? What do you want? And have that true conversation of what I want. I feel like a lot of people are afraid to say, oh, I want a relationship, because the person might think, oh, they might flee or they might leave too earlier, and they might think that I want to jump into something quickly. But no, be straightforward in what you want, and communicate and verbally say, this is what I want. I want a partner who's this. I want a partner who is a good listener, or a partner who loves to talk and I love to listen. I mean, that's the only way that we can know what we truly want once we move forward. But you have to take that self-assessment with yourself. You have to have that single alone time to have an understanding of, what does MH, Mark, Brandon, Dr. Earl, what do we want within ourselves, and what do we deserve, and who do we want that in that person? And we can't also go out and look for, oh, that person to feel that pieces either. It's who can compliment me, and who is a good equal or a good person I can just be with or abide with. And I feel like a lot of us don't ask those type of questions and don't do those self-assessments.
I have a question though. If we even if we ask those questions, right, do we see the illusion of the person? So now that person becomes who it is that we kind of want that person to be. Yeah. You know, does the mind trick us and fool us into that? And has everybody ever been in that kind of situation?
I think, like, in the film, one of, like, to links to what you said a moment ago, Dr. Earl, about, like, average people, or people who, like, in Ghost, in the film, like, I really wanted to toe that line between, like, you know, because there's some people who would never, like, double text. There's some people who would, like, text, and if he doesn't answer, they'd be like, okay, and just take the L. But, like, what I was intrigued with was, like, sort of the lack of, like, it doesn't always make sense how you act, and I think it's almost like, the more, like you said, you want something more if it doesn't want you or something. I think that, like, when he doesn't answer once, and then he's like, hey, and then he tries calling, and it's like, you know, you sort of fall down this rabbit hole. And I think that when you get to that point, like, you're not even thinking about how great this person is, or you know, you are thinking, I think, more of the illusion of who, you know, who you thought they were, or who you want them to be. And you're almost sort of in denial a bit. Like, in the film, it's a lot about, like, that, the being in denial. Like, he's making the dinner even though he's not answering. He's getting ready even though he's not answering. He's, like, sort of just driving on hope. And I think maybe what we're getting at here in this panel is that it's important to have that hope, but it's also important to, like, have, I think, like you said, with the more wisdom you get, you become more realistic. But love, dating, it's not always easy to be realistic, you know. And I think that's where these kind of situations can occur, or that's what they grow out of.
You know, MH brought up a really good point, Dr. Earl, and I think that one of the things that we also don't do is participate in grace, if you will. For example, let's use MH's example that he just used. Let's say that, like, you know, I reach out to a person via text. That person doesn't get back to me. Let's say I even go so far as to making a phone call. That person doesn't get back to me. At that point in time, if I'm able to leave it as that one text and that one phone call initiation, I think that sometimes we can pack.
I think we lost Brandon, and I think we also lost Nigel.
Ray,
probably chime back
just
in.
because he may not have. Can you guys?
Okay, there's that.
Oh, it's just getting good.
Go ahead, Brandon. You're back. Your microphone, is it on? Okay, we'll get back. I think that he'll be able to log back on. So I do have a question. MH, you mentioned the rabbit hole, right? Going down that rabbit hole. Do you ever follow? If you've been ghosted, or if you ghosted, you ever follow that person, that individual, online through social media?
Like, before or after?
after, I guess, or before. That's an interesting perspective. Brandon, we'll get back to your thought. Okay, we just kind of moved on and sort of chimed out, but I promise I'll get back to what you were saying. Okay, Brandon, can you hear me?
No, I still can't hear you guys. I don't know what it is.
We can hear you. We can hear you. Okay, work out those technical, and we'll just go back to MH about going down the rabbit hole. Do you ever follow the person on social media?
Usually, if I'm messing with someone, I'll already follow them, like in some capacity, before meeting them or seeing them. I think the healthy thing to do, like, would be to just not engage or not, go online and see what they're up to. But obviously, you can see, like, from the story that I've written, that he does go online and he does look at his Instagram and he engages in all the, toxic behaviors. So I think, like, the best thing to do is to just put it out of your mind. And ideally, like we have been saying, if you have, if you've done some self-work, if you have hopefully other things going on in your life that you can distract yourself with, then I think that's the best case scenario. But of course, like, humans are curious beings, and if you share a moment of intimacy or several moments of intimacy with someone, it's hard not to, like, be curious about that person after, whether it's the same day or weeks later or months later. I think inevitably you'll circle back and just be curious, right?
Well,
what do you think?
Yeah. No. I think you're what you're saying makes good sense. But then you brought up Mark's when he was persistent with the social media, right?
Yeah.
Mark, what are your thoughts on that, right? And do you see? I don't know how actors do they watch themselves? Why have the final cut? Did you exhibit your behavior in that? You kept on calling back or texting back. How does that work for you? Right?
I think the character that I played was a lot more hopeful than I am in real life. In real life, I would have been like, you know what? I got plans. I'm going out tonight.
Yeah, I don't believe that. You were so convincing.
I know. Okay, Mark, whenever we watch the movie back, Mark is always like, he needs to chill. Like, what is this man doing? But, like, that's like the strength of Mark's performance ability, because he really makes you believe that, like, he is desperate.
I came away feeling that more people behaved or acted the way you did through your interpretation of it, the frustration and all that, more so than, later for this, right? On to the next.
Yeah.
So thank you for that brilliant performance.
I'm not gonna lie, Mark. I was just like, oh man, like, and he's still cooking dinner. I would have
going through it.
I would have waited until the person came over and said, you know what, we're gonna cook together. I didn't know if you were coming or not. I didn't hear. So I was like, dang.
We needed that shot of the two, like, one of the most important shots for me is, like, after he cooks the food and then he's looking at the guy's Instagram story, and then he throws the phone and it cuts to, like, the table and you see, like, the two meals on it. So I think to get to that shot, like, it was a necessary thing just to, like, really highlight, like, how, this guy really had, like, hope, and he really felt comfortable with this person, and he really thought, like, he didn't believe that this would happen, to the earlier question of, like, can you tell, yes, sometimes you can tell, but oftentimes you just don't want to know, you don't want to believe that. You want to think, oh, this is a great person that I had a great time with. Like, they would never do that.
I think a lot of people operate in a self-interest that it can't be me. You know what I mean? And, that person must like me. Right? Yeah. So Brandon, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just adding to it.
Yeah. So Brandon, I know we got cut off. I'd like to go back to what the thought that you had.
The thought that I was having was giving some sense of graciousness and assessing, like, the situation, if you will. Just because a person may not have texted you back or called you back doesn't mean that they didn't get into a car accident, they didn't find out that their mother just died, X, Y, and Z. And I think sometimes it can be about the approach. So it's not to say that ghosting is not something that's non-recoverable. I think you can recover from ghosting, but I think oftentimes people want to be met with something that we don't see all the time, which is honesty and humility. Yeah. Like, can you be humble enough within yourself to come to me and approach me about what your shortcomings may have been and how it is you could have done that differently? And that just might be the ticket to the Wonka factory. Like, okay, you know what, I know that I didn't do this the right way, but can I have a conversation with myself about how it is that I handled it, and can I approach this person differently with acknowledgement of what it is that I didn't do properly, if you will. And I think sometimes that is the art form of trying to get back in when you know that you've already handled the situation with ghosting, with a lack of communication. People even ghost their partners inside of relationships before you even get to some of these other different phases that we're talking about.
I totally agree with Brandon. I recently had a friend, he lives in Atlanta, and he's very handsome, doing well with his job, and he was dating this guy or just chatting with this guy, and the guy ghosted him. And then the guy came back a week later and just said, "Hey, I would just like to apologize." Because he was like, it was just really something in me that was afraid that you were too good to be true. He said, I didn't think I could ever get someone who looked like you, that had your accolades, and I felt like the shoe was about to drop, and I just didn't want to go through a depression. He said, I'm getting therapy now, and would you please give me another shot? I do apologize. And my friend was like, oh, yeah, I was about to block you. But, since you came to me like that, he was like, how about, I'm going to let you start taking the lead a little bit. He said, I'm going to stand back and just see until you can build that trust again. But he was like, but yeah, I'll give you another shot. And I've never experienced or heard any situation in that way. And that just really goes with what Brandon was just saying. You never know what might be going on in that person's mind and the reason why they're ghosting. And it could be some type of insecurity.
So what I heard from that is hope, and people being hopeful in terms of this whole ghosting. You never know what's going on with that, right? So with the individual. So is it possible to rope the ghoster back, right? Or is that wasted effort?
Do we want to?
Well, in the case that you just mentioned, we don't know where that person is, right? So are we just discounting people, right, that ghosted us? Or is there a certain, or should we have a certain amount of optimism? Right? Is there that red flag real, or is it just just a temporary? So what do we do in that situation? Did we try to rope them back, or is that
definitely don't try to rope them back in, I would say. But I think in that situation, that's and people would react to that in a slew of different ways, I think. But I think I don't think you should try to rope them back in, but I think if you do like this person and if you did have a connection with them and they are coming to you with really a really honest explanation of where they are.
Isn't that how ghosting work though? We feel that there's a connection with that person.
I know, but you don't want to be roping. I mean, listen, if you are texting and calling them and stuff, you don't want to put too much. You don't want to do too much.
I'm sorry, Brandon. Go ahead.
No, like what MH was saying and what you just said, that's kind of borderline personality disorder, and a lot of it is all based off of a sense of illusion. Like, I know that we're just talking about music, but if you go back, if any of you have listened to that song that Brandy put out called Borderline, it wasn't about her being on the borderline of a relationship. It was actually talking about a person who was struggling with borderline personality disorder and how it is that sometimes our senses of reality are distorted and we're making decisions that are based off of that. We're taking things personal that we really shouldn't be taking personal. Everything is an attack, et cetera, et cetera. But MH mentioned something that gave me a classic thing that a lot of people know. When a dating situation doesn't necessarily work out and the word is thrown up, oh, well, we can be friends. That is how sometimes people are able to say, you know what, I see that you're not into me, but maybe if I offer an olive branch of friendship, then through offering this olive branch of friendship, I can show you that I'm actually worthy and valued and all of that stuff of actually having a relationship with. But people do it all the time. Friendship is the word that is thrown up with trying to come at it from another approach. So when you say, Dr. Earl, getting the ghoster back, it's like, all right, well, I tried this approach. Maybe if I try not coming at him as being a person that's interested in wanting something more than that, and I come at this individual from a place of friendship, maybe that will allow for them to engage with me more, and somehow I might be able to show them that I'm worthy of looking at as dating potential. But again, it's oftentimes setting yourself up for the okie doke. And I've been a victim of that.
What did you say? The okie doke? What is that?
I
What is
call it
that?
the okie doke. Like set yourself up for the okie doke or the finale, if you will. It's like, oh, well, kind of the joke's on you.
Right.
So I usually will use the term saying, don't set yourself up for the okie doke.
I got a question. Do ghosters think that ghosting is just a kinder way to end a relationship?
I think that everyone's conflict resolution style is different. And I think that some people are head on and they like to say, listen, it's this, I don't like this, let's talk, let's go there. And I feel like for some people it's easier to not do, to do that, to ghost. I don't know if it's better, but I think it's in tangent with people's personality. I do think it's cowardly to ghost, but I also think that everyone handles conflict differently. And you know what? Sometimes in some cases, it is probably a better experience to be ghosted than to be confronted with some things about yourself that you may not want to hear. Maybe you did something on the date that was really inappropriate, or maybe you have a personality trait that is very jarring. And sometimes, it's harder to hear that than to ghost, because when you're ghosted, then you get to tell the story. Oh, he did this to me, and you get to feel. You don't get to feel good, obviously, but you get to tell that story of like how I was ghosted, as opposed to the more embarrassing story of this thing that I was confronted about.
I disagree. No, well, I'm saying that because I feel that if you don't learn from your behaviors, whether it was negative or whether it was suffocating or whether it's you don't get better for the next relationship or the next person. And I forgot, you just said something else. And I feel that sometimes when you want to tell that story, like, I'm not the victim. I played a part maybe that disconnected the relationship or the communication. And, I did something, he did something, but we both came to a conversation and just said it just didn't work. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'd rather have that than to have, oh my God, he did me wrong. And all my friends are like, oh, give me that hug. Like, no, like I did something, he did something, or I didn't do nothing at all. And he said it just didn't work. And that's cool. And we move on. So like,
I think that's the wisdom. I think that's the wisdom talking that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear some wisdom now from the collective thought, right? Let's do some damage prevention or control. Are there any early signs that you're about to be ghosted? Uh-oh. Who would like to take that one on? I want the whole panel to share if you can. What are the early signs?
Are there early signs of? Okay, well, no. You know what, Dr. Earl? I think with what you said, it's almost in its most simplistic form. You don't really know that ghosting is actually happening until it starts to happen. And it's also your perception of it happening, right? So if you're a person who values instant gratification, you might value texting a person and within like a short amount of time, them giving you a text message back. So I don't really know if you can know that ghosting is happening until it actually begins to happen. Unless you're dating a friend of or I'm sorry, somebody who used to date a friend or something like that, and now you're getting into some messy waters. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's part of the phenomenon. It's like that. It's ghosting because you can't really see it coming. But obviously, if someone is constantly being like, "Oh, I'm really forgetful," or "Oh, I suck at texting," or "Oh, da da da," like you can take those cues maybe and be like, "Okay, maybe I should just expect this person to not be the best communicator." But I don't think you can ever really know for sure. Like you can't really tell.
If you can't know for sure, can it be prevented?
Maybe if everybody becomes wise, like Nigel, and does the work like Brandon, then we can get to a better place as a society.
Well, I think Brandon's email is going to be filled with new clients, right?
But what Nigel said just a second ago, I think also speaks to the value of my career. Something that I'm passionate about. I'm very passionate about hearing what it is that a person has to tell me and looking to try to see it from different vantage points or perspectives that that person otherwise may not have thought of. And I think that's one of the benefits of having a life coach or having a mental health therapist. It's to be able to kind of check in and get that good unbiased sounding board, because a therapist isn't always going to tell you what it is that you like to hear. Sometimes a therapist is going to give you some things that might be a bit more challenging. And while it may be uncomfortable, I think that sometimes that uncomfortability is some of our best growth points. Like, we grow the most when we are feeling uncomfortable. Otherwise, how do we shake things up and make room for different things to happen in our lives if we're just continuing to do Einstein's definition of insanity, the same things over and over and over again without adding any intervention, but expecting a different outcome?
I totally agree with Brandon, because I swear this wisdom comes from 5 to 6 years of therapy. And I just remember my therapist saying, hey, no, think about this, or do this, or have you thought about this? And it's like, oh, okay. But everyone, especially in our African-American community, we don't think about mental health as being a way to find that passageway to have a better understanding of how we think or how our emotions are, or getting better, that we just think, hey, going to the gym and working out, that's all that we need. No, we have to work out these emotions. We have to work out this mental health so we can get better.
Yeah. Thank you, Nigel. And speaking of wisdom, our showrunner, Richard, has texted me 10 minutes ago that we are running out of time. So let's wrap this up, right? And I do want to ask the room, and I'll start with the person. Is ghosting, are we at a point now where ghosting is acceptable? And I'll start with MH. Are we at a point now where ghosting is acceptable?
I think this panel has shown, and I think this has been such a great conversation with so many layers, and I think that the truth is just very complex and very complicated. Like, I think it depends on the circumstances and the situation, and so I wouldn't say it's acceptable, but I think it occurs often enough that it's normalized. But I think, again, like, it's very subjective, and it can really depend on the situation and the person.
Mark, your thoughts? Are we at a point where it's acceptable?
Unfortunately, I do believe that we are at that point where, whether it's right or wrong, it's just a normal part of life, especially when we factor in social media and these dating apps and these more, superficial means of communication. I think it's just normal. I think the best tactic for me is, instead of trying to figure out some superhuman way to avoid it, is just to figure out some way to better brace it and better face it when I'm encountering it, and I'll not allow it to derail my life or derail my happiness or make me sad, or or have a moment like my character did in this film. Like, my goal is to not make that pasta and move on with my life.
Oh my God.
Brandon.
Or just make the pasta just for yourself, maybe?
Exactly.
Love that approach, MH. Actually, MH almost took some of my thoughts out of my head and wrapped it up into one. Just saying something as simple as make the pasta for yourself. Hey, dinner doesn't need to be completely off. Can you also enjoy dinner just with you? Or hey, Tony, you free tonight? I made some dinner or whatever. There's so many different things that you can do to try to turn the situation around. But I wouldn't say that we have gotten to a place where it's acceptable, but echoing MH and Mark, I think we have gotten to a place where it is a part of reality. So I think that if you take it out of the potential of the equation that it could happen, I think now you're operating in a false sense of reality and what the real world has. If your whole entire world is crumbling down because you got ghosted, it says more about you needing to put the work into yourself than it does the act of being ghosted.
Thank you, Brandon. Nigel, are we at a point where ghosting is acceptable?
Yeah, I look at ghosting almost like I look at applying for jobs, man. Once you get that, you do the interview, you do that resume, they're not going to give you a call back and say, hey, this is the reason why we decided to go. No, they're going to send you the email, thanks, but we went another way, boom. And so, that's how I kind of look at it. And it's like, okay, this happened, I moved on, and it's a blessing. I don't know who else said it. I think somebody else in this panel said it, but it is a blessing to have a closed door. because you are avoiding a situation that could have happened that you didn't want to be in. And I see that many times when we look back on our on our Instagrams or social media, people saying, "Oh, I'm with this person." You're like, "Oh, that's the person who ghosted me." Then you see a situation that went down, and you're like, "Oh, thank you, God, I avoided that." So yeah, I think it's a thing, but like you just have to give yourself some grace and just go with the flow. And if it's not meant to be, you have to understand it's not meant to be, in a closed doors is a good thing.
Thank you, panel. I really appreciate all of you on deck, and we could have kept on going forever and ever, at least another couple of hours, because there was things that could have been uncovered, right? So I do want to thank you for tonight's amazing discussion. But before we close, I'd like to share a thought. This and this kind of bubbled up in the conversations that we've been having, right, this evening. This new dating frontier that we're in that presumes that for our own well-being, we'll eventually inoculate ourselves from the psychological harm of being ghosted. This new dating frontier, we must inoculate ourselves from the psychological harm, right? One way of inoculating ourselves is by being indifferent. I know Mark alluded to that earlier, being indifferent to relationships and even wanting to engage in them, right? Now, if this is the case, what would life be like where relationships become even more disposable? What a brave new world this is. This is Dr. Earl, and on behalf of the entire onePULSE Foundation team, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening, and we'll see you at the next Conversation Starter. God bless, and good night.
Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to bring in Mark, the star of the film, to chat a bit about, the process and what we went through making this. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Matt.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So what's like one funny or one interesting tidbit that you can think of from shooting this movie?
I kept on thinking the whole time we were shooting how realistic this is, like how I've been in this position before and how I felt like a lot of people would relate to it because it's such a common part of dating in 2022 or whatever year, we're in. And yeah, I don't know. I just had this really keen sense that this was like very close to home, not just for me, but for a lot of people. In terms of anything fun that happened on set or like anything crazy, we had a pretty smooth filming experience. Nothing really crazy happened. I wish I had a better story to tell of like something funny, but we were all professionals.
It was very serious. It was a very serious shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, it was serious and luckily very smooth. Like nothing to my knowledge went off. I mean, I've been on sets where everything goes wrong and you're just like struggling for air. This one just kind of felt really smooth and everyone was there. Everyone believed in the project. Everyone believed in the script and we're all professionals. And I guess one thing that is like a fun like tidbit from the day was that I don't know if you remember, but there was a scene where my character was like walking and crying. And we shot it. We shot it near where I live. And I remember us walking by a restaurant and me crying and looking into the restaurant and someone's like, is he okay?
Yeah, we did a lot of like guerrilla shooting, I guess, for this, just walking around and forcing Mark to be very emotional in public. So thank you for doing that.
So like, should we send help or is he
Yeah. And another interesting thing about it, I guess, is like we did, like you said, we shot in your space and we shot around your house. So I think maybe that lends like a sense of like naturalism or realism to it. And was it like difficult, like easier for you you think to get into the character because we were, there was a lot of those elements involved, or?
I think it was harder actually because I feel like when you're in your space, you're very conscious of certain things. So like you're more sensitive to like, what is he doing? Don't touch that. Or like, why is this person there? And so stuff like that, I think made it a little bit harder. But also, especially shooting things outside, I've lived in my neighborhood for a long time and I know everyone and everyone knows me. And it was a little bit awkward to be able to get into character sometimes because, you're seeing your neighbors and they're like, what's happening? Whereas, I've been in other stuff where you are just so far from your own life that you can kind of create something crazy. Like I can act crazy on the street and no one knows me or cares. And there's no conversation for later. But at the same time, I think in some ways it was harder, but in some ways it was easier to be in a space that I live in and that I'm familiar with and that I know where things are and how to move through that space. So I think it had its pros and cons.
What about the reception of the film? Like we took it to some festivals, but obviously it was during COVID, so it was mostly virtual. But we were able to get it up on YouTube, and it's been a pretty great reception so far. How has it felt for you to see like the comments and see how people have been reacting to you and your character?
It felt really good. I feel like this film just really hit a chord with a lot of people, and everyone that I've spoken to about it has said that it just really hit home with me because this is such a relatable experience. So it was really cool to see how well it was received and how well it did. And I think that's a testimony to the writing, to the directing, to the to the talent behind it. And I'm just lucky to be a part of it. And I honestly don't even feel like I did much. I just literally showed up and reenacted my ghosting experiences,
Yeah, it was like it probably was a year from when we at least a year from when we shot it to when it actually started going to festivals. So even though it's only a 10-minute film, it was kind of a long creative process for me. But you were integral to the process, so it wouldn't exist without you.
What's been the coolest part of this for you, like as a filmmaker? Like what's been the one thing that has happened in terms of press or in terms of accolades or recognition that you've gotten that is the most like felt really good, felt the best?
I don't know. I think obviously going to Inside Out in Toronto was awesome because it's such a prestigious film festival for the queer community. So going there was amazing. Screening at SIF, like in Seattle, was great. I really wish I could have gone because I've always wanted to go to Seattle. But honestly, I think it's like on YouTube, like seeing every now and then I'll see a YouTube comment on it and it just like makes my day or something. Like it's been a while since I released something that had such a strong reception. So I think just it is a very like online movie, or it's like a virtual movie in a way. So I think the fact that it got released on YouTube and that people are reacting to it is sort of exactly what I hoped for in the end. So, and obviously it was a good way for us to start collaborating since we have a few more projects in the pipeline. So this is sort of just the beginning of a beautiful friendship, as they say in the cinema.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm looking forward to other stuff that we're working on.
Me too. Maybe we'll discuss it later.
I feel like we already have.